How's your ankle, Colleen?
You should be good to start, Renee, if you'd like.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Um, Before we get going, I just want to recognize that we're meeting today on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, the gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this is a reminder that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous peoples. Thank you. Um, Item 3, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, well, can I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Councillor Williamson, thank you. All in favor to approve the agenda? Okay. Thank you. Okay. And if I can have a motion, please, to adopt the minutes of the previous meeting that was held, says here November 21st. Oh, never
No,
mind.
it's
I'm reading the
January 20.
minutes. That's what happens when you staple the agenda to the minute. So I'm gonna rip it. All right. Motion to adopt the minutes of the previous meeting, which was on January 23rd, 2024. Thank you, Lorraine, and all in favor. And thank you. All right, now item number 6, correspondence. Seeing none. Has anyone received any related correspondence since this came out? Okay. And item 7, declarations of interest. Don't see any. All right, and now we're on to business item number 8, heritage interpretation options for John Page and Fairview Parks update. And Amanda, you're on deck for that? You're on board for
Yes,
that? All right,
yes,
welcome.
correct.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
very
coming out.
much. Thank you. I do have a presentation. It probably will take me about 15 minutes to walk through with you folks. So I'm going to share my screen. One participant can share at a time, that's fine. Does not appear. Just bear with me for 1 minute. I think the problem is I have so much open on my screen here. Here we go. And I'm going to start from the beginning. So thank you everyone for having me today. If we haven't met, if we didn't meet at the previous meeting where I came to the task force, that was probably back in May of 2023. I'm Amanda Knutson. I'm Community Project and Development Planner with this city. I work out of Community Recreation and Culture Services. And I have been tasked with project managing a community vision exercise for Fairview Park and John Page Park. If you're not familiar with it, it's sort of tucked up behind the corner of Scott Street in Geneva, just north of the Fairview Mall. It does comprise 2 separate parks, John Page at the north end, which is more of your typical neighborhood park with a playground, and then the larger Fairview Park, which curiously isn't actually called Fairview Park. We've just sort of adopted that name over time, which is essentially a large open space. There's several reasons why we wanted to go through a visioning exercise for Fairview Park and John Page Park. One, we wanted to address some concerns about things that are happening in the park today, and understand how people in the immediate neighborhood and then the broader community would want to use that space. We need to respond to anticipated high density residential that we're going to see come into this area over, the next, say, 10 to 15 to 20 years. We anticipate that a lot of the nodes like this area will see, a higher density, larger apartment buildings. So you could anticipate quite a bit of residential growth here. And of course, we're supported by our friends in the planning department in their work in planning for those residential uses. We need to also continue to address any needs that we have from a recreation and programming perspective in community recreation and culture services. And those needs are outlined in our parks policy plan and our recreation and facilities programming master plan. And of particular interest to you folks is that we want to respect, enhance, and celebrate the history of this property. As you know, there is a section of the former Third Welland Canal that is buried beneath the park, and there are very obvious and visible remnants here of a former swing bridge. The NS&T Railway crossed through the property in north-south direction, and the swing bridge itself carried freight and people over the canal historically. Today, we're left with what is the center pier of that swing bridge. So the bridge sat on top of that pier and swung in order to let ships through. And then the northern abutment, which is in a bit rougher shape and tends to be the larger target for vandalism today. And then lastly, we also want to support our other departments in the city and the CAO and council and all of their strategic documents, including the active transportation master plan that's coming up, the culture plan, and of course your historic Welland Canals corridor interpretive plan, among several others. So we began public consultation for this visioning project back in April of 2023. We did a series of online and in-person surveys. We went to each of the apartment buildings that surrounded the site and met with people in the lobby. There were several hundred survey respondents. We're really pleased with the result of that survey. And we were able to get a really good understanding of how people use the park today, what they want to see it used for in the future, and what some of their concerns are about the park in terms of maintenance and safety. We also met with you folks May 9th, 2023, and you highlighted a few really important things for us in terms of how we can commemorate the heritage of the property. You asked us to be consistent with the work that you're doing in your interpretive plan, to retain the swing bridge remnants and to incorporate those into play feature or some other interactive feature. If the swing bridge remnants were to be removed, which you did not recommend, that hopefully at least the components of that, of those remnants could be incorporated into the park somehow, perhaps, using them for seating, these types of things. Formalized desire lines being the sort of beaten paths that crisscross through the park. It's very obvious when you visit the park that people are traveling from Scott Street or the apartment buildings in the north through the park to go do their shopping. And so you had suggested that those be formalized. The idea to include thematic playground, so perhaps a playground that has a ship in it, or something to do with the former railway. Thank you to Renee Ressler, who emailed me very early on in the process to let me know about two old bollards associated with the third Welland Canal that are sitting in a field right now. And the suggestion that they be repurposed in this park, potentially for a plaque, or to help us create a sense of arrival at the street frontages. A suggestion to incorporate public art and to use technology in heritage commemoration. After all of the consultation that we did in the beginning, which included going to the public, yourselves and other committees, including the Heritage Committee and the Rec Master Plan Advisory Committee, we went to the public with two concepts that were developed based on the feedback we received during the first round of consultation. Our consultants were very purposeful in providing one concept that was sort of very community and recreation focused, and then a second one, which I'll bring up in a minute, that's very heritage inspired. So I think many of you have probably seen these plans before. This first one incorporates, first of all, I should explain that what you're seeing right now is something called a bubble diagram. It's not intended to be a very detailed layout. It just generally shows you, using color, the areas of the park that could be available for park improvements. So this orange boomerang looking shape could be a skate park. The light blue, a water play feature. Of course, our labyrinth is in the south end of the park here. Sort of just a large passive seating area or active games area. And then also incorporating opportunities for heritage commemoration and playground. The heritage inspired or heritage focused plan included a lot more opportunities for commemoration and interpretation. So, two larger areas for interactive heritage features, thematic playground. You can see here, these black outlines are the remnants from the swing bridge, an outdoor classroom area, potentially for things like tours by schools or the museum. They can come and educate kids here, or just members of the public in general, about the history of the site. And then an installation of stations along the pathway where you could learn about sort of the history of the property. This plan also had a dog park and multi-use courts. In September of last year, we launched the second phase of consultation and brought those two plans to the public, both online. We had a second survey that was very aimed at looking for feedback on those two plans themselves, asking for a preference in one plan over the other, or potentially a combination of the both. We had 78 people respond to that survey, so significantly less than the first round. And then on October 4th, we had an in-person open house at the Kiwanis Aquatics facility, where about 50 people attended, and we did some interesting in-the-moment electronic surveying to get an idea of what was important to people on the plans and which one they preferred. There was a clear preference for the first concept, the more community or active use, recreation use plan, but there was also a strong desire to incorporate heritage interpretation or to highlight the importance of heritage in the design of the plan. Just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight that that evening people had indicated. There was a real strong desire for a skate park. It was the most asked for feature for the park. And you can see just above it, though, this was a series of words that sort of populated on the screen as people were voting in the audience, for lack of a better word. Right above it is heritage. So we knew that there was a strong desire to have lots of recreation features, skate park, water play, courts, etc., but also to incorporate heritage and tell the story of the history of the property. Following the second phase of consultation, with the help of the St. Catharines Heritage Advisory Committee, we were able to hire ASI to help us do some work in imagining how heritage can be interpreted in really outside of the box ways. They produced for us a heritage interpretation options memo, and I just want to highlight for you 5 or 6 of their ideas that they suggest be incorporated into the park. So of course you have your standard interpretive plaques, panels, and timelines. They've highlighted a few here from Australia, because of its context with rail history, and then another Australian example, but a separate park. These are just, in their opinion, more effective in telling the story, telling the history of a property, as opposed to just plaques that might, just celebrate the historic significance of one particular component of the history. This is more of an attempt at telling a story and giving a timeline, and it incorporates some images from the past, obviously. They provided some options for how to interpret or commemorate through landscape design and paving. On the left here, this is a sort of a segment from the High Line in New York City, where they incorporate bits of the actual the rails themselves, and then some elements that sort of signify the old ties of the rail line. And then this interesting one, which you may have seen before, is an actual map that's etched into the concrete in Boston that shows the historic transit routes and railways. Perhaps the most significant or obvious way, and maybe a most effective way to commemorate or interpret, would be to use what physically exists in terms of remnants and repurpose them. So they were happy to take a look at the bollards that we have over near the existing Welland Canal, the 4th Welland Canal, and have suggested that we use those to, along with park signage, to signify the interest to the parks, both at the Scott Street entrance and at the Geneva Street entrance. And of particular interest to me is how we deal with the remnants of the swing bridge themselves. And they're very supportive of an option where we recreate a bridge and sort of recreate that rail line and use it as a multi-use path. And I can show you that on some plans in a minute. And of course, they've provided us some options that you've already highlighted in terms of thematic play. So here's a couple of examples of, a train and sort of a lock or canal inspired play structure. They've also recommended that we incorporate public art onto the property. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Pole, our new tow horse sculpture in Port Dalhousie. This is something that they celebrated in their work and thought it would be, something that we can draw from in terms of incorporating public art into Fairview Park. So after that's a lot of talking and a lot of context, but where we're at today is we've compiled this plan. This is called a master plan, and it's a draft version. What we've tried to do is incorporate all of the park elements that the public has wanted to see, that we might be needing in terms of our rec facility master plan, so filling gaps, and obviously trying to do our best with telling the story of the history of the property. So I'm going to walk you through the plan here, starting at Scott Street. And again, keep in mind, this is a draft plan. It's obviously subject to some further revisions and ultimately council approval. So as you arrive to the park at Scott Street, this is an area where we could see one of the repurposed or reclaimed bollards, obviously new park signage to create a sense of arrival, something a bit more formalized, and perhaps with flowering trees to create a better aesthetic at the entrance to the park. As you come into the park, you can either veer onto the existing pathways or approach the recreation of the swing bridge. Albeit it would be fixed in place and not a swing bridge, but this black Z here, or what appears to be a Z, those are the remnants of the northern abutment. This square in the middle, it's labeled as number 3, that's the middle pier that exists today. And the southern abutment does not exist and would need to be recreated. So the idea is that you'd be on a bike ride or out for a walk with your family. You could hop on this multi-use path and approach the remnants. And there would be a new bridge deck structure that spanned the remnants. And it would be made out of metal grid so that you could see down to the remnants. And while you're on top of the decking, you'd get to experience this long vista through the park. And I don't know if it's obvious to you, I really hope it is, but we have very purposely laid out these 2 lines of trees to visually signify the north and south bank of the former canal. So we're purposeful in sort of stacking some of the recreation elements in a vertical line down that old canal orientation. So there'll be some areas up here where one could stop on a bit of an observation deck and enjoy the view, or perhaps they can look down below and watch their children play. And I don't know how far I can zoom into this, but this concrete area that would be at grade, our consultants have all suggested that this would be a good spot to include that etched map in the concrete of all of the 4 canal routes through the city. So it might not be that clear to you here, but it's something that we're hoping to achieve through detailed design. And I'll get into what the components in here are in a minute, but as you leave the bridge, you continue down this multi-use path, and to your left here is a skate park. This was the most asked for improvement for the park, very popular. It includes a larger skate park with a bowl for teenagers, older youth, even adults, and then an adjacent smaller park for primary school kids, maybe little toddlers who are interested in just beginning skateboarding or biking. And then around the skate park is what's called a pump track. So typically it's younger kids that use these. They're on their bike, and it's a series of hills and dips where they can build up some speed and have fun dipping around and going in loops. So the multi-use path continues, and we have a series of 2 tennis courts. This could also be reconfigured for pickleball, overlaid for pickleball. That's a decision that we're still thinking about in terms of best use of the area. And at the end of the multi-use path, you end up down at the Fairview Mall. If I back up to Scott Street again, if you didn't take that more active multi-use path, you could be over here and playing at the multi-use courts. So these are things like basketball courts, futsal, ball hockey. Those are typical courts that we would have in a neighborhood park. Next to the courts is a washroom building. And of course, that is necessary in order to support this, the water play feature. So these three bubbles, if you will, are intended to be a water play feature or a splash pad. This center bubble would include the above grade play toys, the bucket, the guns. Again, we're thinking that that would be themed, and that some of the elements would either be related to shipping or the railway. And then these, the flanking bubbles would have just a series of spray jets from the concrete, likely different pressures. So maybe a lower pressure one for smaller children and something a bit more standard for older children. This area here, it represents a playground. And you'll see that we've included a ship as the main play structure in the playground. It's oriented in the direction of the former canal, very purposefully, excuse me. And you'll see how we have chosen two different colors for the surface. Obviously, the blue being in the line, within the line of the canal, and the brown being outside of the canal. So even when, so that even children can catch on to these clues of where, that important heritage feature is located. We were careful to try and group all of these children's play features into one area so that a parent could be here and they might have kids of multiple different ages. Maybe they have kids playing on the playground, another one's at the splash pad, but they're all sort of, the parent can be in one spot and sort of keeping an eye on everybody. Just a couple more things that I want to highlight for you. We've included some opportunities for gravel pathways, so sort of a hard-packed gravel stone, chip stone, that can lead you to this potential naturalized area. So maybe this is an area where we have pollinator gardens. It's intended to be a really quiet space where people can learn about different pollinators and native species in the city. In the center of the park, where the pathways intersect today, we've included a pavilion, and that pavilion is surrounded by some more decorative or ornate flowering trees. The existing labyrinth here at the south end of the park, we want to build on that and create an arboretum around it, so various different species of native trees to Ontario. And the addition of those trees will provide a good buffer between, what is intended to be a quiet and reflective space from, the noise that would normally come through children's play throughout the park. Lastly, I wanted to highlight this area, which we hope to be a community garden. We've been approached by a couple of the apartment buildings along Geneva Street asking to use portions of the park for community gardens. So we know that that is an important inclusion. I know I said that that was the last thing, but I have one more item to highlight. And again, this might be difficult to see because of the scale of the drawing, but in this area here, there are about 5 or 6 blocks. They're gray blocks. If repurposing the bridge remnants requires us to remove some of the broken blocks or any blocks really to achieve the appropriate grade for the approach to the bridge, we'd like to reuse those blocks into the park. So they could be used in this area for seating. Honestly, if you place anything like that in a park, children are going to have fun hopping up on them, hopping down, and running around them. Again, I said the last, but not. So this is another area where we envision an opportunity to repurpose the bollards. So at the Geneva Street entrance, there isn't much today that signifies that there's a park there. In fact, I don't think many people know that this is an access to the park. On the right-hand side of the screen here, these are some sort of examples of what the heritage interpretation or public art components of the park could be. Sorry about that. I'm just going to zoom in. So this is an interesting light installation of a ghost ship that's been done elsewhere. Again, we see this stamped map in concrete. Just an interesting boat sculpture. This is the repurpose of structural elements of a building for seating in a park. And then there's some other examples up here of what the skate park could look like and pump track if it were painted. And of course we have our bollards here. So in terms of the next step, what comes next? I've been working with our consultant on sort of making a few revisions to the plan, very minor details really, but we want to finalize that master plan, the draft master plan. There will be a report that accompanies that plan that talks about heritage interpretation, for example, phasing of the park, implementation, costing, these types of things. We also intend to go back to the public a third time. We have a public information center tentatively scheduled for April the 3rd at Kiwanis Aquatics facility again, where we hope people will drop in, come and take a look at the draft master plan and give us their feedback. We'll also be returning to the Recreation Master Plan Advisory Committee in February and the St. Catharines Heritage Advisory Committee. And then ultimately, we hope to be in front of council in the spring to present the final plan. If you have more information, have questions about the project, or you're looking for more information, we do have an engage page, stcatharines.ca/plan your park. All of the materials, background information, the concepts, the draft plan are available there or will be available there. We keep updating that page as information is available. Or of course, you can reach out to me. But today I'm really looking for your feedback on where we're at today. And I thank you very much for being patient. Well, that took probably a bit more time than you or I anticipated. So if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. So does anyone have any questions for Amanda in regards to her presentation this evening? No questions? Oh,
Looks like Councillor Williamson and
Councillor Williamson.
Garcia have questions.
go ahead, Councillor.
Oh, well, I'm happy to let other people speak before me.
Okay. Councillor Garcia, got your hand up there?
Yes,
Except
you
for
want me to go
Councillor
ahead first? Sure. Just a couple of questions. Thank you, Amanda, for that presentation. The labyrinth, please share with us what's the status vis-a-vis the Kiwanis. I know at one time they wanted to name that area or name part of the park. What happened there?
That is, I'm not privy to the details of that. I'm sure that Eric Lamoth or Phil Christie are. I understand there's some history there too in terms of some donation that was made. So I'll have to leave that for now. I unfortunately can't answer that question.
Okay. And the other thing, which is something I'm sure Councillor Williamson will ask about, and I had to step out for a couple of minutes, that you mentioned an area where there is a gravel stone path and so on, but the other paths, what are they? I'm hoping they're not going to be asphalt trails.
So this pathway here, that has an orange hatching to it, that is a multi-use pathway that is shown in the transportation master plan as a future pathway through the park. That would be finished to the minimum standard required for a multi-use trail. So that would be asphalt. Other areas of the park include these gravel paths looping into this naturalized area, and then very few extensions of other hard surface paths. The intent of that, first of all, we were very cognizant of your comment process that we should be minimizing hard surface pathways in the park. However, we did hear from the public that they want to enjoy a loop, an accessible loop through the park. When you come into the park today, and you travel along this pathway, there's no way to loop back around. You have to basically turn around on the park and head back the direction that you came. So we tried very hard to balance the provision of accessible pathways and also alternatives in the form of gravel. We're also looking at doing more low impact design alternatives for some of these paths. So maybe paving stones that are a bit more permeable and allow water to filter through.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Councillor Williamson?
Thanks. Yeah. Following up on the hard surface, and Amanda well knows my view on that. And I should preface, we live just north of the park, and I'm intimately familiar with it. In fact, 2 sons that go to Brock, if it's going to be an hour wait coming from the downtown terminal, because either the Geneva Street or the Lake Street bus is not there for them, they get off at Fairview Mall and then walk across this park to get to our neighborhood. And I'm in there all the time. And yeah, we know that there's some residents in the park, semi-permanent residents that are concerned, but that's not okay. I digress. I agree with Amanda. Like, this is surrounded by a lot of high density, as well as large hard surface asphalt parking lots. And to me, and we passed the climate change emergencies 4 or 5 years ago, and we're losing a lot of green space. So to me, we got to keep as much of this a natural area and as a heat sink. So anyway, I'm all over the place here to start with. Anyway, one of my goals is to retain as much soft or natural space as possible, as opposed to hardscape. And I see a lot of hardscape and a lot of active recreational pursuits. And I guess I guess some of the users are going to be from the immediate neighborhood. And of course, ironically, there was a splash pad that still exists at the former YMCA, a couple hundred meters from where this splash pad is. Should have been nice to have kept or turned into the public realm. There's going to be a demand for cars and parking in here, and there's no, like, for these kinds of recreational features that I know some of the young people, teenagers, etc., will come to the skateboard on their own, but there'll be others brought by parents. And I'm not sure if some of these sort of active recreational pursuits are necessarily a good fit for this park. Maybe some, but not all of what it seems like it's going to get pretty congested and a lot more hard surface than I personally would like to see. So that's an overall comment. You don't have to respond, Amanda. And then,
I would like to respond to a couple of things if I can, Councillor. We have about 5 parking spaces that exist. They're out near the Geneva Street entrance here. We had shown a bit of an extension of that parking area through the public consultation process. It was not well received. We did hear from people that they want to maintain very large open green spaces here and not give any of that up for parking. That makes absolute sense to me. I think our recommendation will be that the city work with the Fairview Mall to maybe at least have an agreement to use some of their parking spaces, because we recognize that there will be more of a citywide draw to this park for the skate park, for example, pickleball or tennis courts. That's one comment. Another thing
I was going to mention that too. The city did, when there was a mini golf course there, we had an agreement with parking spots along that edge of Fairview Mall.
So we're hoping to revisit that.
Great.
The other thing to keep in mind is, while you do see a lot of improvements to the park in terms of structure or hard surface, it's important to remember that this is a 7-acre park, and we're developing not even 50% of that. So we've been cognizant of trying to achieve a balance between larger open spaces and quiet spaces and providing the recreation that the community desires. But I appreciate your comment there.
Yeah, we can agree to disagree a little bit, just because there's so much hard surface, particularly car parking around it. This is like a little green oasis that's really needed for the community around there. I some positives. I love the arboretum idea, and I love the community gardens idea. And I get we're going to have a more formal connection from Geneva Street. Is that going to be one way or two way? Do you know, Amanda? Into
I connect. Where do you mean? Sorry,
the connection coming from yeah.
Yeah, that exists as a 2-way driveway today. It's our property, but the adjacent Kiwanis apartment buildings have a right of way over it, so it's in and out today. But it probably stops at about the midpoint of these parking spaces. So we've shown a few additional parking spaces here.
Great. And is there a way to distinguish between existing trees and new plantings in this diagram?
It's probably difficult for you to see. Existing trees are outlined in white hatching here. Whereas the new trees are shown in the darker colors.
Okay, and then I guess I'm kind of contradicting myself a little bit when I'm looking for a more naturalized space. But is there also going to be some just like open green lawns left behind? So if a group of people wanted just to get together, have a pickup soccer game or throw frisbee around, something like that, is there going to be space for that still?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this plan can be deceiving in that this is a massive park. And so, this space here might look like it's only 15 feet when in reality it's 100 feet wide or 50 feet wide. Do you know what I mean? These are intended to be naturalized areas. So primarily no mow zones, except for introducing some pathways on lawn should these apartment buildings wish to have access. But these areas here are quite large, and we certainly are cognizant of people wanting to just come and have picnics or kick their ball around with their kids. There's another large space here.
Great. And I had another one. What was it? Lost my train of thought here. If it comes back to me, I'll chime in again. But thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you,
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Lorraine?
Hey, first of all, thanks, Amanda. I had a lot of questions as we were going along, and you answered most of them, which I certainly appreciate. So I just have a couple questions left. The first one is, when I look at where the skate park's going to be and where the possible tennis/pickleball court might be, and I see that pathway, I'm wondering about the protection of walkers walking along that asphalt path. Number two, so what protection do they have from stray balls or things being thrown, especially in the pickleball area?
Yeah, typically tennis courts are protected with chain link fencing in most of our designs. I
You
don't
didn't
think
mention that, so I wasn't sure, and I don't see
No
it.
problem. So you can expect that courts like this, active courts, would have chain link fencing around them, and same with these multi-use courts at the top, so that when you're walking along, you don't get hit by a ball. That's in that sort of circumstance. Yeah.
Which are good for protection. It does take away from that natural environment, of course. Then my next question is the outdoor fitness circuit. I don't remember you
Yeah.
showing where that is.
Sure.
It's
The
on your
outdoor
diagram somewhere.
fitness circuit could be anywhere. The intent of it is to just provide stations along the pathways. There'd be a series of signs spread out, and each sign would have a suggested exercise for someone to do. So it is not what you might think of as like you've seen exercise equipment in a park. We don't envision that. Again, trying to sort of balance maintaining large open areas, green spaces, and the amount of structure or physical improvements to the site. So we thought that this is a good alternative. Still providing sort of an activity for all of the age groups, right? And we wanted to make sure that we ticked something off for the older adults here.
I sort of have questions a bit about that. I see
Mhm.
that a lot in Toronto when I'm working there, and I've seen it in Font Hill, and it tends to be someplace where seniors kind of gather to do it together and have company with each other. So I don't know about the spreading out. I'd have to think about that a little bit more. And I do
Sure.
know there are a lot of seniors in that area, in those
Yes.
apartment buildings, a lot of seniors. So I'd like to see, even maybe if it's with you had mentioned about the leftover bricks or stones or whatever, someplace like kind of like a little amphitheater type where there's shade, where they could sit and talk. I see that a lot in parks, seniors walking through, and I think that's a good use for them as well. Someplace sort of in a natural environment, not too, man-made, but someplace to kind of gather and sit and talk. I mean, yes, the physical pieces are wonderful. I think there you've got some amazing physical opportunities. I could see myself bringing my grandson, for example, at 2. He would, get a lot out of that. But I also think that I don't know if there's enough for seniors or for, adults walking through. And I think that, that whole idea of a sort of a natural place for them. I sort of echo Councillor Williamson's ideas as well in terms of that natural spot. Like, for example, when you talked about the native plants, are you thinking of inviting our Indigenous partners in? You see some of the things that they've done, say at Queenston Heights with the beautiful natural plants that they have there. So what would who would you be consulting with those natural plants that you said? I think we're around area J.
Yeah, there's definitely opportunity to consult with the Indigenous community, not only in terms of species selection for the park, but potentially for even the skate park. There's an opportunity for public art to be painted on the skate park. So there are some good opportunities there. I did want to point out a couple of things for you that I didn't highlight when we walked through the plan. Because they're quite small scale. No problem. I'm just thinking about seniors or older adults. So we have shown here, and again, because of the scale of the drawing, it's going to be difficult to see. There's 2 little black squares on either side of this pathway. That is an opportunity for pedestal chess tables next to the pavilion. So a gathering space that you're talking about with shade. And then we also have 2 table tennis tables down here. So outdoor ping pong. Again, something that seniors might enjoy. We try to provide opportunities for all age groups, but to keep sort of the super active uses, louder uses in the northwest of the park and the quieter uses in the southeast section of the park, which is the closest to all of the seniors who are living in the Kiwanis apartment buildings here and these others.
And
Just a couple of points.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And benches?
Lots of benches shown in the
Okay.
park. Again, it's hard because they're so tiny when you're looking at it from this scale, but
Mhm. You know, all along I kept thinking, is there some kind of legend? Like until you got to this slide, I kept thinking, what are all those letters and numbers and things? So I really appreciate this legend, even though it's a bit hard to see. But you know what I mean? I think that that's really helpful. And so I guess will we at one point get a summary or this slide with the legend on it once you get to a
yeah.
different part of the plan?
I can share my presentation with Kathleen and she can forward Kathleen or Carla and they can forward it on to you folks. This plan, once we've made some final edits, will also be on that Engage page and you will be able to download it and zoom in yourself so that you can read these fine details and labels.
That's terrific. Now, what my final question, back to the benches, are there opportunities to for people to say purchase a bench to honor someone or
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, we have a memorial bench program in the city. There's lots of room in this park to accommodate more memorial benches. There are quite a few that exist already, but certainly, yeah, that program is very popular, and we have annual installations of memorial benches. This would be a great place for those things.
Thank you. And I appreciate the historic nature of some of the displays that you have. So maybe we'll even get some benches in honor of some historical people. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lorraine. I just wanted to add something myself. An update on the bollards. Councillor Williamson and I last month went out to take a look at them a little more closely. And we're not engineers, but we both came to the conclusion that they probably wouldn't survive the trip out of their present location to be used as displays. Both of them have cracks running right through the entire length or width of them. The outer facing of both bollards is fragmented. There's parts missing, and the ironwork is missing on both of them. So, in our opinion, we came up with is that they probably, for the amount of the expense and the expense to refurbish them for use in the park, even if they, we felt that as soon as they went up on a crane, they'd crumble and fall apart.
Yeah.
They're in rough shape.
Thank you for that update. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
We would have to look at those bollards, everything on this plan in more detail when you get into the design stage. And they certainly would require, a restoration specialist to take a look at them and evaluate, what their structural integrity is. But I appreciate that update. And that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that.
There's another opportunity to gather more Third Welland Canal remnants at the gas station, right behind the gas station on Geneva. By the way, I live in the building right by number 7 there, so I can see my house in this picture.
Great.
But by the Geneva Street entrance, just as soon as you access the Kiwanis property, there's a large tree, and around those trees are cut stones that were, when they built the place, that were taken out of the ground from Lock 6, which is located. Lock 6 was right where 113
Yes.
or 213 Geneva is. But those stones in years gone by, probably in the 60s when they built the 2 townhouses there, were just strewn around the street. And I've looked at them. They're obviously Third Welland Canal lock breast walls facing stones. Some of them still have the quarryman's marks to them. So they are authentic. Maybe they could be salvaged from Kiwanis, or they could donate them to the park as added features. There's quite a few of them. It's probably 15 or 20.
So these aren't located in the park today. They're located
No,
on Kiwanis
but they're
lands.
located adjacent to the Geneva Street entrance to the park, on the right, by the picnic table and the tree. They're just strewn around the tree.
Okay, thank you.
Overall, my view of this plan, I live next to it, so I see what goes on in there every day. Last year, the city installed new benches on concrete pads. They put in the labyrinth, and they've put in fixed garbage barrels. And each one of them already has been burned and vandalized. So, I don't mean to be the devil's advocate here, but anything put in that park today or in the near future is just fodder for vandals. Anything until the housing situation gets better and people aren't forced to live on the entire north end uh, of the park. On the other side of the fence that
Mhm.
links the buildings is semi-wooded area, and folks are in there with encampments. They're uh, building large fires. Like I said this morning, there were folks had an open campfire going, you know.
Yeah.
So it looks wonderful. It's a little busy for my liking for a park, um, but it looks really nice the way it's laid out.
Thank
My
you.
feeling, though, that even if it's completed in the next 5 years or so, it's not going to last long. The features in that park will quickly be vandalized or trashed.
Well,
That's
I
just my
certainly
view
hope that
as someone who lives there. I
that's
live in the neighborhood.
hopefully not what happens. And one of the things I think, regardless of what goes in this park, one of the things that has to be considered is staffing and maintenance of the park, and there needs to be support for potentially a full-time staff member to be in this park. There's, when you have more eyes on a space, when it's more heavily used, it's less prone to vandalism. So we're thinking about some of those principles in terms of making sure that the space is safer, and that some of those less desirable activities will happen. But I certainly can appreciate you being a neighbor and seeing some of these things and how that's concerning for you.
The general view of this park as it stands now by a lot of the neighbors is it's dangerous. They won't go in. It's like
Yeah.
what Centennial Gardens was 20 years ago, 15 years ago. It's a
Yeah, and
place to
that's
be avoided, not walked through.
right. And that's part of the reason why we're doing a community visioning exercise, because we know that if we do nothing, those things will continue to happen. So hopefully through park improvement, greater use of the park, more activity in the park by the general public, will be discouraging some of that less desirable activity.
Thank you.
Thanks, Renee.
Councillor Williamson, you have a question?
Yeah, I just remembered one of the items, and I come up with a second one. Amanda, if you go up to the top there at Scott Street, and I think it is, now where you've got the new asphalt, I think we could eliminate the duplicate section there that kind of run parallel to each other. It's too bad when we could just do a jog just above where you had the cursor there a second ago, so we wouldn't have a duplicate path through that section at least.
We've considered that. The issue is that pathways in our park need to be accessible, and there's a maximum 5% grade that we have to adhere to. So that length would be necessary in order to achieve that accessible grading.
You couldn't. So okay. What about the section that's just to the existing asphalt pathway to the east of it?
Yeah.
That's not 5%.
No, it is. But in order to be able, you have to imagine that there will be a bridge deck on top of these structures that exist, right? There's a
Okay.
recreation of the bridge that's happening, or that's the idea. And so you have to be able to achieve a gentle approach to that bridge deck, which is why there's this second leg here, why we couldn't repurpose this.
Okay. I wonder if you could maybe provide us what ultimately is an alternative with just using an extension of the existing pathway to connect from sort of where it makes the curve to the east, go connect from where the
Yeah, I understand what you
It's
mean.
it would just veer off a little bit to the left, and so you would eliminate that. Okay, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I didn't. And then the the circular area around the bridge turret. That sorry, could you just explain that a little bit more? Or maybe I wasn't
Yeah.
listening carefully enough.
This is intended to be like an opportunity for seating, to gather, to have an at-grade view of the vista of the canal. It's an opportunity to provide public art. So it's shown as a concrete surface with seating along the perimeter. These are not intended to look like steps. This would be an at-grade patio area, essentially. And people would be able to meander around and around the remnants and beneath the bridge, and sort of experience the physical touch of that, the history there. And then there's also opportunity to, etch mapping of the canal system in that seating area there.
And what's roughly the diameter of that?
I'm not sure, but I can get you the number.
Okay, I just curious. Thank you.
No
Thank you very
problem.
much.
You're welcome.
Brian, you have a question?
Yeah, I have to say that there's a lot about this design that I really like. There's a lot going on. A lot will be going on in this park. I particularly like the reconstruction of the bridge, the arboretum area, and the community garden down at the other end. Is that community garden going to be just for the people living in the area, or will it be something that you could approach the city and say, "Hey, I'd like to do. I live in Port Weller, but I'd like to garden there." Is that a possibility?
I think there's opportunities for that. The idea really started from groups that approached us in the apartment buildings, but I think it's a large enough space that we could consider doing something like that, like a garden share program.
Right. And unless I missed something, did you say anything about lighting in the park?
No, I did not. A couple of comments about that. There are very few exception, with the exception of very few parks. None of our parks are lit in this city. Now, we are proposing to introduce an active transportation link into this park. This, following the western and southern edges here. Our environmental services department is undergoing an active transportation master plan exercise right now, where they're looking at what the minimum standards for these more modern active transportation links should be. One consideration is providing solar lighting along those transportation links, and it will also consider things like the level of maintenance. For example, in the winter, will some of these trails need to be plowed because they do provide transportation link for people?
Okay, thanks.
So there's still a little bit more work to be done on that sort of that other project that would, inform this project.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian.
Olivia, you have a question?
Yeah, Amanda, this is great. I love
Hi,
it.
Olivia.
Hi. I'm just hearing a lot about public art, and I just want to keep in mind, going through the call to artist process when we're doing this, and keeping in mind the cost of quality public art as we move forward with this. And I actually think this might be, I don't know if it's in your timelines or if this is like too much extra for you, but I think you might benefit from presenting to the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, as I think they would have a lot of ideas to share in regards to public art, to kind of get the wheel spinning. I know I have my wheels spinning already about projects in other locations and just thinking of lighting and things like that. So yeah, if you are able to fit it in, I think that might be something that they would appreciate and you might benefit from. potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that this week.
Okay.
And certainly I'll be looking to you and Ashley for some high level costs that we can include in our report
Yeah.
for council's consideration about high quality public art pieces. Thanks,
Yeah.
Olivia.
Not a problem. Great job.
Thanks.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for Amanda in regards to the presentation?
Looks like Dan has his hand
Okay,
raised.
Dan?
Yeah, thanks. Amanda, this is really nice. I used to live up in that area, don't anymore. And yeah, it was a fairly daunting park, and maybe still is. So to see this is great. Also, I mean, I often explain to people, I pull out a map of St. Catharines and say, see that? That used to be a canal, right? So it's great to have that emphasized, which is the point of this committee, right? I was just wondering if, talking about active transportation, if on the sort of the bottom left corner there, I think that's where the Zares is and all of that, if there's going to be, is that where the Zares is?
This is Zares.
Okay,
Yes.
so then the other side. So
This is Home Depot.
Will there be, is there a consideration of having access to it from up there, that top part, that area where your hand just was, where your cursor,
Like coming straight through
Yeah, in
and down
there.
through Home Depot.
I just
Those
think
are-
because that might be nice for people to cut through there.
Yeah, there's an obvious desire line there today. When we get to the implementation stage, detailed design of these pathways, that's a conversation we would have to have with Home Depot, because we would essentially be encouraging people to drop out onto private property.
Right.
That already happens today in a more formalized manner at Fairview Mall. We have a bit of a gentleman's agreement. There's nothing on title, but we have an existing pathway that leads people onto their private property. So that it makes sense to have a link there, but that's a conversation we need to have with Home Depot.
Thanks. I'm sorry if you said that earlier.
I didn't,
could-
but no, so thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to interject. There actually is an opening in the fence there that people
Mhm.
routinely use. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's got a couple
know
of vertical posts to ensure that cars don't get through. But oftentimes Home Depot has pallets of materials stacked along there. So it is a bit awkward to negotiate, but a lot of people do use it, and there's a beaten path there.
Thank you.
Just an additional point too. The stretch of roadway in front of, at the bottom behind Zares, that where you said we have the gentleman's agreement, that is a very busy thoroughfare. People drive through there very fast, including all of the bus routes that use the Fairview Mall as a hub, use that little stretch of road. And the roadway itself is very close to the curb and the park boundary. So, it's
Yes.
very busy there.
Unfortunately, we did not have great success in conversations with them when we created this trail. It would have been our preference that the trail extended as a curb face sidewalk into their property. They were not amenable to that. So, but thank
All
you.
right, Lorraine, you have a question?
Hey, just one last question. Amanda, the black arrows that you see along the top, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then one at the top. What are those? At first when I looked at it, I thought, are those entranceways? And then I thought, no, they can't be. But then after Dan's question, I'm like, oh, maybe they are. What are those black arrows?
So there's existing chain link fencing all along that stretch of the property today. What we have found is that some people, residents of these buildings, have taken advantage of gaps in the fencing to walk through the park. These arrows represent an opportunity to have discussions with those condominiums or apartment building owners as to whether they would like a gate through the fence. Some people absolutely want it. Others do not, because they worry about their safety in terms of people coming from the park and into their property. So of course we've had conversations about what those gates could look like, having, maybe the passcode entry fee, like the lock features But that's a minor design detail that we would approach each of those apartment buildings with in the future. It's really they're up to their preference. If they don't want a gate, there doesn't need to be one provided.
Just a
But there
note on
wouldn't
that.
be, oh, sorry, and there
Oh.
wouldn't be a gate anywhere else in the park to like stop entry after a certain point.
What do you mean by that?
Well,
Sorry.
you know, there's no lights, and so just thinking of those gated
No.
entrances, there aren't any gates anywhere else.
No, you wouldn't
Okay.
find new fencing across the frontages, for example.
Right.
Absolutely not. No.
Okay, just wanted to check. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
I just wanted to add in regards to, I live at 351 Geneva, the one building that number 7 is linked to, and the one just immediately south is 345 Geneva. And both
Yes.
our building and 345 have gone to considerable expense to seal those entrances and accesses to the park with new fencing. So obviously, because of the current condition of the park, that may change at some point.
Right.
Are there any other questions for Amanda tonight?
I just have a comment, or actually a question and a comment. Amanda, I find this really ambitious, and it would be a marvelous transition for an important piece of property. Unfortunately, I kind of side with Renee's camp and concerns about the minority who have total disregard for nice things. However, it would be marvelous. But my question is, how is something like this funded? Is it funded completely from the city, or is there outside grants, or is it completely up to council?
There are several ways you can fund a project like this. First of all, you split the project up into phases. They're typically 3 phases, and you implement this plan and those 3 phases over a series of multiple years, so 10 years minimum. And that allows council opportunity to budget for this annually. So council budget is one way to provide for funding for the park. Another way is through development charges. So we have a new development charge bylaw in the city, as well as a community benefits charge bylaw, where developers of larger projects have to pay to help fund the provision of new services, including parkland improvements. It's another way to fund the project. There's opportunity for grant funding. We do a lot with provincial and federal grant money across the city. Of interest to me for this project is that there will be a significant amount of grant funding available for projects that are tied to the 200th anniversary of the opening of the first Welland Canal. So with that in mind, we thought it was important to highlight the heritage of the project through thematic playground design, etc., so that we put our best foot forward in making an application to those types of grants. So lots of different ways to fund the project like this. It comes from different places, and it happens over many years.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions from committee members for Amanda in regards to her presentation? All right, well, thank you very much, Amanda, for coming out tonight and running us through this plan. It's very comprehensive presentation indeed. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. I
and
really
sharing it with
appreciate the
us.
discussion and the feedback. Okay. I'll stop
All
sharing
right.
now.
Now for our next meeting on or item on the agenda, the date of our next meeting. Is there anything anyone else would like to add before we go to the next step? Okay. All right. The date of the next meeting is scheduled for March 5th at 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. and it's a Zoom meeting. So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? All right. Thank you, Colleen. All right. Thanks, everybody.